in the past when we did introductions, it just felt a little bit more formal, you know, and it felt like we had to force some content out sometimes. Like there was one episode where me, Christian, and Dom were just kind of like forcibly shitting out content. We didn't know.
Essentially, we're forcing to talk. So now we're starting a new arc. We're going to go on the soot arc or the I don't know, sleepy time.
The we don't give a fuck anymore kind of arc. Yeah.
We're just talking together arc.
Yes.
I'm trying to still be like the wholesome person here. It's not gonna happen, but I'm gonna keep that idea up.
Anyways.
Cheers.
Gentlemen, welcome to the Checkpoint Podcast. Happy to have y'all here. Anyone hear about the recent EA rebranding of loot boxes as Surprise Mechanics? Y'all hear about that shit?
I saw in passing. I didn't want to read it because I kind of expected it would go in a place that would make me upset or feel weird. So yeah, give me a rundown because I don't want to read this.
I'm on the side of upset right now. I read it and I seen Jim Sterling's coverage and Yang Ya's coverage, and I want to throw a brick into their house. Fucking hell.
Into what? Jim Sterling's house or Yang Yang's house? Cause
no,
I throw a brick into their house.
Office.
But yeah. So most of us, at least me and Alex, have read or watched through Jim Sterling's video on the EA rebranding loot boxes surprise mechanics. I personally disagree with that, but we'll get into that later. Andrew, any thoughts on this so far? Well, you know what? I'm just gonna read out what exactly happened, and y'all can just respond to that. So
yes, no, that works.
Let me see. Oh wait, no, that's the wrong one. Let me see. Do
you want to go with the surprise mechanics that they had at extremetech.com?
At what? That's something.
No, like there's a bunch of. The first article I pulled up was Extreme Tech. If you Google it quickly, you want to find a good article to start with.
Give me one moment. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm unprepared for this. I've been reading on this all day, all night. I have lost sleep because of this. Okay.
Just scroll up on images.
You know what? That is right. I should be doing that. Okay, so yeah, check it out. So, Kerry Hopkins, EA's VP of Legal and Government Affairs, in a statement to the UK Parliament. Let me see. Let me start over. So, Kerry Hopkins, EA's VP of Legal and Government Affairs, in a testified in front of UK's Digital Culture, Media and Sports Committee on Immersive and Addictive Technologies. She stated that, actually, let me see if there's an actual quote on this. She insists that the company's randomized purchases aren't loot boxes, but rather surprise mechanics. And she states that for years, whether it's Kinder Eggs or Hatchimals or LOL Surprise, well, you know what, I'm just gonna cut that out. I don't have the rest of the quote. But essentially, yes, she is trying to say that EA is trying to rebrand their loot boxes as the term surprise mechanics, and argue for the case that loot boxes should not be regulated or outlawed by government hands.
Okay, so this is essentially a way of trying to, keep the loot boxes are being managed.
Sorry, what?
Sorry, you kind of broke up a bit to me, so I was recapping. So you're saying is that essentially this person's using a different phrasing to hide the fact that loot boxes are kind of a shady part of EA's new business.
Right. Well, not hiding that they're shady. I mean, you don't have to say shady. They're just saying that, okay, so UK Parliament is saying that, EA, what do you have to say about the fact that these loot box practices can be addictive and can be considered gambling and can be considered, harmful for players and for kids these days. And Kerry Hopkins is just stating that this loot boxes are more akin to just surprise mechanics that have been prevalent in culture, really, in things like Kinder Eggs, things like cards, like Magic cards, Pokemon cards. Yeah, they're just surprise mechanics that people can enjoy wholeheartedly and safely.
Safely is that's a word, Alex.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
If you look at her freaking face when she's saying that, she doesn't even believe herself. You look at her face when she does it's
Alex, hold on, you're cutting out.
And keep her company while she's in front of it.
Can you
Oh,
repeat
wait.
that? Repeat that. You cut out. Sorry. Repeat that.
Okay. So she, the problem is she's saying, she's just trying to keep her job and basically subvert the conversation as EA always does, and all these major publishers always do. You're being like, there's been warnings years and years, like EA, stop fucking around. EA, stop fucking around. EA, stop fucking around. And then just there's this stupid clown that just wants to stick their finger in a god. This way I've been exposed. There was this home. He would go into this really nice burrito place, and you just walk up to the person and stick his finger in the burrito and say, "Can I have that?" What are you gonna do? You gonna eat the burrito? No, you're gonna fucking let them do it and keep doing it. So there's just fucking. It just finally had its peak around Battlefront, and now they're just trying to subvert their conversation so they can just get away with it again.
But with your example, okay, so I think you cut out there for a bit, but I remember you telling me this before. You were saying like a homeless guy in San Francisco went and stuck his finger in a burrito. Is that what the story is?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not exactly understanding the. I'm not exactly understanding the.
Story that you actually want to talk about instead of the EA thing.
No, it's not. It's the idea is that he every time I was there, either like every other week, he would constantly do it, and people would get away, and people just shrug it off. That's what I'm trying to say. People just go,
right.
Oh,
No one's
whatever.
calling them out on their shit.
No, and then when people call them out on their shit, they go, "Oh no, it's not gambling. It's surprise mechanics."
But-
I'm just like, fuck off.
But to be fair,
okay.
No, but to be fair, loot boxes are really not gambling. According to the UK Gambling Commission, the Australian Gambling Commission, and many other gambling commissions, at least according to what Kerry Hopkins says, they have all agreed that loot boxes are not gambling, and there's also no evidence that actually shows that it leads to gambling. And the way that EA handles it, these are just products that people can enjoy in a healthy way, and people that like elements of surprises.
Healthy.
Yeah, it's healthy.
This is the thing,
I
it's
mean,
like, just
wanna
because
poke a hole
a
there.
classification, yeah. Go ahead, Chris, and I'll talk.
Yeah, just the legal thing, talking about how just you said that several governments recognize this and so. It's like not. I mean, there's a point when cigarettes were seen as like a negative thing, as like an unhealthy practice, like a doctor would recommend it for you because you've had a bad day or something.
though,
I'm
to be
saying
fair,
that-
they still haven't proven that completely. But go ahead.
With loot boxes. Their EA's having a shit fit about it. Remember that?
Right.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here. Yeah, but go.
Trying to say we have to kind of look at this as not just a company to this is like trying to promote an unhealthy thing. This is something like they rely on in order to like maintain the status quo. They're gonna like lie through the nose in order to keep things the way they are. Because right now this is what makes them money more than anything else. I think with FIFA and how many people spend money on their version of loot box in that game.
I mean,
More than like bottom games that they're making.
can you repeat that? You cut out like the last part of that. Sorry.
So he's basically saying like FIFA, they want to keep the business running a shit, and that's what they've been doing. And so it's been working because no one's been paying attention. Finally, it hit the fan whenever Battlefront came along, and everyone was like, no. And that's the point where they were like getting legislation and bannings. And best way to handle this situation is not make it so predatory, because on the other side of the fence, Activision has patents that basically used to use Destinies as a mold, that people would get better loot, and it would give an idea of envy, and then you could win this loot if you buy a loot box from it. It's like really big social engineering on the player by using envy and also having random chance, and also the fronts.
But how is that different from?
The dopamine surprises.
But I was gonna say, how is that different from Yu-Gi-Oh's or like card games, like Yu-Gi-Oh or Magic or Pokemon? How is that different from those card games where you could have another player have freaking Blue Eyes White Dragon and you don't have Blue Eyes White Dragon, and you just know they got Blue Eyes White Dragon because they just happened to get the right booster pack for it. Like, how is that different?
It's not. That's the thing.
No.
It's really not that different. The way that these loot boxes are currently being issued is the same way that booster packs were used to being sold back in the old days.
Right.
It's actually the same exact thing. This is the main reason why the UK it was the UK, then Belgium basically said that this was not gambling, solely because the items you're receiving better not be considered currency, and not to mention you're basically getting something because of the payments.
Mm-hmm.
If this was actual gambling, it's either you win your money back, or you gain money if you succeed in winning the game, or you lose everything when you lose the game. But that's not the case, because you're actually getting something out of paying the money.
And
this is why.
Continue. Sorry.
Yeah, and this is why we can not get. Now, the question the second question we had, because I kind of want to unpack this in different kind of sections, because there's a lot to kind of like discuss here. Is first, is it gambling or is it not gambling? And not gambling because it does not fit the definition of gambling. Second question is the idea of the addiction. Yes, there seems to be an addiction and a problem with people spending their money dealing with their addiction because they want to unlock more stuff, and they're actually betting on trying to get the right stuff by spending more money on it, and that's why it's the problem that basically everyone's going into. And then the third part is all of this basically fair, and is this not causing a disturbance within the gaming community and basically the community as a whole? So that's where I kind of want to point this discussion at 3 different sections, because I feel like we're kind of mashing this to one thing.
Well, I feel like it's disrupting I can start with the whole disrupting the gaming industry as a whole, because if we look at stuff like Shadow of War, there's a giant loot box grind wall. They removed it, but it was post-launch and post-relevant. In order to beat the end game, you would have to either constantly grind to no means end, or you could buy loot boxes from the store. In a single-player game that has no multiplayer component, a single-player game that, I mean, look, time savers are fine in some aspect, but don't make it force it onto the player. And that's what's happening. Is we're seeing that a lot in games, in $60 games. It's the $60 game is just the entry fee, but you're making me pay an extra $70. Why not just include it in the only game? And that's what most content policies have been doing as well. It's not just a pure cosmetic thing. Cosmetic's one side of it. Sometimes it can even affect just full games, and that's what I was saying.
So, right, I mean, but exactly
yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, can you guys explain exactly what happened for Battlefront and Shadow of Mordor? Because from what I've read, for example, for Battlefront, there were just things that powered up your characters, the star cards, right? That's what you got from Battlefront's loot boxes, things that made your characters or your units better in multiplayer. Yes, sure. But it doesn't lock away actual mechanics. It doesn't lock away a full game mode. You still, sure, you pay $60, but you still pay $60 for the full game, for the single player, for the multiplayer, for the different multiplayer modes. Yeah, but you don't get the character improvements from those $60, but you don't need it. You can still enjoy the full game on its own at $60.
How can you enjoy the game if someone's richer than you?
Okay, wait.
One at a time.
Okay. How can you enjoy the game in the first place if someone's richer there? Someone can just pay for a gun and not just use their gun to pay for it, and then kick your ass. You're gonna make you want to pay for it. It's completely manipulative. Put in this, and Call of Duty did this as well. Is that the skins had better perks and had perks attached to the guns themselves. So you would play a game of multiplayer, you're just starting out, and some kid has this super awesome gun, he made no effort on winning, and he just paid $60 for it.
Okay, then you could pay your own $60 for it.
Game.
Well, why can't you pay your own $60 for it?
I already paid $60 for the game. Why the fuck would I pay him $60?
Well, I mean, that means that kid went and paid his $60. I mean, that means that kid just cares more about the game than you do. And, if you care more about the game,
it's not a matter of caring, it's a matter of balance.
There's also can I touch on something?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we're talking in the even playing field, spending money on something seems fine. If you have the means, you can do that. But there's a predatory nature to this where people are basically being they're developing patterns where they're overly spending money that they either don't have or an unhealthy amount. And and in this video, you see these as whales. These are high earners. This is what loot boxes and these little time savers work, because there are individuals 1 or 5% of people that play the game that invest a ton of money into it. The thing is, it's not always going to be a positive thing, because individuals might not lose their sense of control over what's going on. That to me is the scarier part, where people are making money off of someone's addiction. And you can argue that they have choice. You can argue that this is it's their fault, but
yes.
You don't see EA mitigating the system to make sure those people don't get affected. And in fact, they're relying on these people.
And I mean that's those people's problems.
Around that.
But that's the problems of those people themselves. I mean, okay, if you're EA, if you're just a game developer and you see there's a market for people, then you know that there's people that's gonna buy your product why do you not just market to them? Like, yeah, okay, sure, you know, you could say it's evil, it's bad, yeah, that, you know, there are people who are susceptible to falling for addictive things, but at the same time, as someone who needs money, you know, as developers, Christian, I know you might be able to speak to this, as developers who need money, you need to market towards people who will give your team, your studio money. And if there are people who will give you money, why not just market to them? You know, like, okay,
then, you know, play with a different business model. Look, right now we're at a time that maybe in the next generation we can start raising prices of the games to about $70 a game, which is, I know, and this sounds scary, but
that is scary.
If we do inflation costs,
Mm-hmm.
If we do inflation costs for games in the 80s, that would, like, their $50 were $100 for today's dollars. So
I mean,
we're spending.
Also, put this in perspective, the fact that we've had this $60 thing since I think the 360 generation, or maybe before that. I mean, if you look at games like back then, how much they cost, like N64 games, they were still the same price, just including inflation.
Yeah, they were like 60.
Instead of charging me $60 and then cut, so I'm a giant Destiny veteran, and Activision's whole behavior with cutting content and piecemealing it so they can squeeze out every single dollar. Like, I didn't even play any of this season pass, and that was all Bungie, but like Activision promoted and they wanted that, and like, why not just charge me for the full entire game at full piecemeal, and then just give me expansion packs how WoW handles it, how Diablo? Why? Because fucking it doesn't work anymore. Because people don't want to pay for expansion packs, but people want to keep going back to that. It's just bullshit. It's complete
I also want to
bullshit.
say there's other business models. What we're seeing right now, subscription. I think during E3 we saw like 3 or 4 new subscription models for random things, either streaming or a game like lineups. Like Ubisoft now has a subscription service, which, I mean, it does feel kind of gross, but if it's the alternative that keeps people from maybe spending an ungodly amount of money and is, I don't know, it gives you actual rewards that don't necessarily uneven the playing field in multiplayer games, it on paper sounds much more of a ethical choice.
You see, I actually have a thing. I have a thing about subscription models myself, which is the idea that you know, this from me being someone who's actually played subscription model games, is that it kind of forces you to want to play the game more. It almost makes me a bit more addicted to the game because I know I'm spending money per month. You know, like for example, when I was playing Final Fantasy 14, I know that, you know, I was pouring in $15 a month just to play the game. And, you know, even though I didn't want to play the game, some days, I was like, well, you know, I'm already putting money in this month. I should play the game to get my money's worth. You know, it was like, it feels like it was addicting me in the sense that, like, you know, I was losing out if I didn't play the game to get my money's worth each month.
But see, that's an entirely different line of circumstances. It's not really the same as loot boxes. I mean, you're basically paying for playing a game that's continuously being updated per, I said quarter, I'm actually not sure.
Live service.
But yeah, so basically it's I wouldn't be able to kind of compare those two because you're kind of comparing apples with oranges at that.
Yeah, because that's a live service. That's another part of the problem. I mean, live services are great, and Destiny, I think, handles this pretty well as of recently with Shadowfall and was it the Forsaken? And I think Division kind of picked up the pace and figured it out correctly. But y'all remember the Division 1.8 patch, right?
What happened exactly in that patch?
I'm gonna pretend
I don't recall this.
There's a shit ton of loot boxes that determine gear strength, and they like put it in there for like I think until 1 point. I mean, it's like 1 point. It was an early patch that they fixed everything, and then they put a whole bunch of cosmetic loot boxes, and it just skewed the whole thing. Another thing would be, I'd say on the thing would be also Deus Ex, and I've said this before. They put loot boxes in Deus Ex 2 weeks before launch, and it completely unbalanced the game, a single-player game. Okay. Loot boxes are fine if A, chances are shown for said item, B, it's earnable in game, C, you can actually resell it on the market same way freaking Steam does it.
But okay,
So
that brings about the other issue where, like, if you add value to, or sorry, if you make it so that you can actually sell items from a loot box, then that means you can actually add value, or you can assign values to that loot box, and then it becomes more comparable to gambling at that point. because in terms of gambling,
they do that
you
with
make
CS:GO.
money. Yeah, they do, but
No, we know to do that for CS:GO, yeah. But the thing is, it's gonna make more problems for the company that's trying to make the money, because then they'll have to deal with competition for people who want to sell stuff that they don't need at a lower price point than what they would sell for. Especially since it's a guarantee as opposed to the random roll that you would normally get from whatever box they sell.
Well, I mean, the same thing for like cards. You can resell cards if you buy.
Yeah,
Pokemon
exactly.
cards, you can resell that Pokemon card. It'd be significant less, but you can't resell fucking items digitally. They're stuck and tied to your account. The only way to sell the thing is sell your entire account.
No, right, but my point was going to focus more on the fact that the companies don't want it to happen, because then that's exactly what's gonna happen. Like you're right. It's gonna be beneficial for players to sell the stuff they don't want or need, or like duplicates or whatever they get out of the loot. But if they are going to be able to sell it, the company is not going to make any money. At least not the projected money they want.
Actually, Andrew, it's not so much. Well, part of it is actually not. Fuck it, you're wrong. No, it's not so much that the company isn't gonna make profits from the player reselling that. It's more that the companies will actually run into issues with legal issues with it actually being considered gambling at that point, because gambling is considered where you put in money in order to try to gain money back. And if a player puts in money to get a loot box with a chance to get however much money back from that loot box so that they can sell the items in the loot box, it then becomes more similar to gambling. Does that make more sense? Like, it's not so much that the company can't make money from the items that the person sells.
No, but then we're going to go into another debate on whether or not all the old stuff that we used to have in the past, booster packs, etc., are also considered gambling, which is going to.
But there was. Yeah. So, but there already was that discussion. You know, like when, like in 1999, I actually watched this recently. When Pokemon cards came out, there actually was discussions on whether, you know, Pokemon cards, booster packs was considered gambling for kids. And, you know, like, yeah, there was no, actually, no. What people concluded was that, you know, it's fine. Like, kids are just kids. They're just gonna have fun building these decks. They enjoy buying cards. It's good for the Pokemon company to make money off of this. And, you know, there was no conclusive evidence that led to kids back then actually developing a gambling addiction just from buying Pokemon booster packs.
Right, and then so by that logic, then it's not considered gambling.
Yeah,
because there's no case for it to be gambling yet.
Exactly.
The thing I was trying to put here is that because that is not considered gambling, you can arguably say in courts via the fact that since Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh is a similar model to what the loot box is trying to do, then therefore it's not gambling. Period. So
yeah.
it doesn't bring up another legal issue because there's precedent already.
Right. But yeah. so yeah. I mean that. So yeah. Yeah. Loot boxes it's not gambling. But the thing is, Andrew. Sorry. I think it was the idea that. Sorry, Alex, just to cut you off. But I think Alex was talking about how it would be better if you could sell the items from a loot box.
I don't disagree.
But see, I disagree with that, because if you do, then it becomes more akin to actual gambling. Whereas, you know, it's like you were saying, Andrew, though, because precedent already stated that it was not considered gambling. I still feel that, you know, even if they did make it so that you could sell items from loot boxes, you could get away with not being considered gambling because of like Pokemon card precedent. However, it's because, you know, it's not a physical item, you know? Because it's not because it's a digital item, you don't know how you could lose that data. Or, you know, the fact that there's an actual company or an actual organization that controls all these items digitally on a server. You know, it's like each person does not own physical copies of their items, of their, you know, loot box items.
Digital copies.
Yeah, so that's why, like, it's a different case from Pokemon cards or from other, like, you know, loot crate stuff.
No, but since they own those servers, but what if those servers shut down?
Exactly.
If those servers shut down, they better have a pretty good backup, or it's gonna be an epic lawsuit.
But that's why it's like it's
permanently.
But that's why, you know, it's a different case from saying like but that's why it's a different case, you know, instead of saying like you do have precedent of Pokemon cards, because like I said, Pokemon cards are physical items that you have that the individual has and can resell with, you know, physical value. Whereas, you know, digital items, you don't know when a loss could or could not happen. So I do see the case that there's precedent, but there's also no.
But then you're getting into we're gonna go down to another rabbit hole because for me to counter this argument, I'll have to go into computer networks and all that stuff, and that's gonna be a giant mess.
Wait, where are we? I was like not paying attention.
Yeah,
for 5 minutes. I'm so confused. Computer networks.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So basically, even I'm kind of losing my train of thought right at this moment, just because what was the original thing we were talking about again? It was basically we started about comparing.
We're talking about EA rebranding loot boxes as surprise mechanics.
No. I know that, but it's the one example you were giving earlier, where it was like you're comparing. You didn't want people to be able to resell the stuff they get from loot crates because it would be a
it would open up.
to
Yes,
the fact
it's not detriment. It would open up a box of worms where lawmakers could argue that this is similar to gambling.
No, but that's the thing. Okay. Actually, no. Yeah, you're right. They will.
It's just I do get that you're saying that they could use the precedent that Pokemon cards were not considered gambling. At the same time, it could just open up they could go into a different direction by saying that these are now digital products and not physical products.
But then you can actually make the argument that digital products are the same as physical products, and that's going to open up a whole other can of worms.
Right.
Yeah. So
it's there's another court. There's another case that can be made for people who want to mark all this entertainment surprise mechanic stuff as gambling. Because in the end, if you do end up, sorry, go ahead.
It's just, but the thing is, the gambling companies and the casinos use the same slot machine mechanics as the same thing. Chasing legendary gear and legendary skins and epic skins and whatever the heck they are called, high tier skins, is the same thing as chasing jackpots. Mm-hmm. You're chasing a jackpot because you want that jackpot.
Wait, but remember, a jackpot is not guaranteed. Well, you're always guaranteed something with loot box.
Yes, but you're not guaranteed a legendary. You're not guaranteed a legendary. You're not guaranteed a jackpot though.
Well,
that's the thing. You're not guaranteed. You're guaranteed to spin something, but you can either get even if you had the same item, that's equivalent of getting nothing on the getting all cherry and then strawberry and whatever, and that has no value. You're not getting anything. There's a good example is that Japan has gambling that is outlawed. And the way they get around it, in the same way that EA is kind of acting as of right now, is that when you gamble in Japan, you're not really gambling, you're playing games. And using those games, and you get prizes, and those prizes you just walk across the street, and then conveniently, someone can buy it off in a pawn shop across the street. I wonder why.
Oh, that's cool. So that means people in Japan can actually, monetize their winnings.
They're not monetizing their winnings. They're just gambling, and they're just doing it. It's subverting basically what they're. When you spin a slot machine and you win, you get coins, and those coins actually have value. Mm-hmm. For Japan, you basically do that, but then you just go across the street and go to the pawn shop, and conveniently the same price that the whatever the casino is paying or. Fucking like that. You're basically getting the same thing as you were if you were winning on that slot machine. Same thing applies to how EA is doing right now, is rebranding and skirting around the thing. They're trying to do exactly that same idea, is they're trying to skirt around it so people still can get money, but it's not gambling per se. It is 100% gambling. It is gambling your money on a digital good that you're not likely to get, and you're chasing a jackpot to hopefully get a legendary skin. I don't know how I can emphasize that even more. Is that the same thing as slot machines? Is the same thing as a slot machine. Slot machines don't tell you chance, because if they told you chance, then they would be out of money because people would figure out the math thing. They don't. In some countries, especially for NA, they don't tell you the chances. There are other governments, like you said, the other governments that were saying, oh, well, it's not gambling, so they don't have that. But the Dutch government, as I was saying, the Dutch government has regulations. China has regulations on League of Legends loot boxes. I think majority of loot boxes, actually, and they have to disclose the amount. And I remember a story way behind where EA and Activision were crying, well, that's going to ruin our business. It's like, how is it going to reveal the chance it's going to ruin your business? It's not. It just basically gives an actual percentile of how likely you're supposed to get this item. Same way how likely you're supposed to get the fucking gamble.
But like we said before, though, when you gamble, you have a chance of just getting nothing back. But with loot boxes, you will get something back. Even It's just you might not get something that you want back. Like you still get something that the developer deemed equivalent to the amount of money you put in. At least they deem the box that you give.
You keep saying
equivalent.
developer. The developer doesn't make these choices 100% of the time. It's mostly the publisher that makes these choices.
Well, okay.
Wasn't that? I was gonna say, yeah. Talk about the Destiny thing.
Okay,
Destiny.
okay, sorry, go ahead.
You want me to go on Destiny about how fucking the summer solstice bullshit were like?
Actually, yeah, summer solstice would probably be a good option.
Yeah, you want to go on it? I'll tangent on it too. I'm gonna pull up an article. I'll drop it in.
I mean, I need to remember exactly what happened because I don't want to give wrong information. So if you know it offhand better,
Summer Solstice basically locked a lot of major like event content behind loot boxes.
What do you mean by by that exactly? Well, like what do you mean by content? Like actual.
There was a
like,
major
stories?
event, and you had to pay. It's been a while, so
Yeah, exactly.
I was like,
That's why
I pretty much dropped playing Summer Solstice, and I just bought the T-shirt code off eBay because I was just like, fuck this. I played so much Destiny, I'm not gonna fucking miss out on this shirt.
Was it the Solstice? No, it wasn't Solstice of Hero. Well, that's Destiny 2, I'm sorry. Hold on.
It was Solstice of Heroes, I think, that had like,
But that's
it was
Destiny
like a winner.
the one with the T-shirt,
Destiny
right? Okay, fair enough. Go for it then. So that was Destiny 2. Basically, Destiny has an anniversary every year ever since the launch of their game, where they give you a bunch. It's basically an event that happens, I believe, is it 3 weeks or 4 weeks? I can't really recall much.
It was 4 weeks.
Yes, where you basically get to do a bunch of activities and try to gain new loot from the game. When Solstice happened the first time, it offered these cool, looking new armor pieces that I believe you actually had to build from scratch. So I remember there's that. There's also the new ghost shells that were basically coming out that looked super cool, but you have to get through Eververse. And then there was a bunch of missions you also had to do, but I'm actually blanking out on the rest. But if you're talking about, if you want to just talk about Eververse, you can just talk about Eververse.
Eververse has loot boxes, technically.
Because it is loot box. Yeah.
I mean, based on
loot boxes.
I was gonna say based on the fact that you guys barely even remember what happened, it doesn't sound like it was that bad of an experience for you guys then. Like if the Destiny
because I stopped playing Destiny after a while because fucking Activision kept fucking over every single content. I got bored of it.
Because it made them just leave.
Yeah, I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to do the event. And I just said fuck it.
And isn't that fine? If you don't want to do the loot box event, then you as a player just don't have to deal with it. And other players who do want to take part in the ethical surprises or mechanical surprises are allowed to do so. That's the way I see it. It's like you don't have to take part in loot boxes. But people who want to, people who enjoy the surprises, they're allowed to. That's the way I see it.
You don't have to participate in taking cocaine, but if you're an alcoholic, that's what you're saying to me.
That's an extreme example, but
I know, I'm making a joke. I'm making a joke.
That is a very extreme example.
You don't have to jump off the bridge, but if you want to commit suicide,
God damn,
it's such a
we're cutting that out. We need to cut that out.
Argument.
It's fine. They don't have the first half of that argument.
Okay, wait. We need to organize this because I think we're jumping all over the place.
I'm just saying it's a giant subversion of basically the argument. You don't have to do it. But the thing is, we'll go back to Shadow of Mordor. You have to do it. Otherwise, you're going to have to grind for almost 80 hours just to see the end game.
And is that so much a bad thing, though? But I mean, is that so much a bad thing?
Game as a negative. The one thing I don't like about that, it frames the actual experience of playing the game as a thing you do not want to do, which is almost counterintuitive with what most devs are trying to make. They're trying to make an experience they enjoy that a user can enjoy. So it's almost like a conflict of interest, not working with each other and trying to create two different experiences. One being playing the game, the other one being spending money the game.
To skip forward in the game, basically. But let's regroup our thoughts right now and focus on one of the main questions here, which is, I guess the one we're trying to focus answering right now is based on what developers are trying to do to make money. Is this fair to the current gaming environment that we normally enjoy?
Can you clarify what you mean by the gaming environment? Are you talking about gamers or are you talking about to consumers? What do you mean by gaming environment? Because if you're looking at overall gaming industry, like this is great for developers, for studios,
yes,
for publishers, and
so so we're gonna go with the ethics for developers in the next question. But right now, let's focus on
for
how
consumers.
it currently affects gamers, consumers, exactly. Which is right now the arguments focusing on 3 primary points: the addiction, the idea whether or not it's fair, and the idea of which is it actually breaking the games?
So let me just put my piece, which is that I'm still of the standpoint that it is up to the individual. If it's an addiction, it's up to the person if they want to be addicted to it or not. Everyone is allowed to control how much.
Addiction's a choice.
At least for gaming, yeah. I mean, you can choose to put in money on the game whether you want to or not. You can choose to buy the game whether you want to. Or you can choose to put in more money into the game if you want to or not.
The word addiction. The
idea of an addiction is that you can't stop doing said compulsion because it's addicting. It's not that someone can't just go like gun to head and say, "Well, stop doing it."
Okay. So let's focus on the idea of addiction. So yes, we have a problem called gaming addiction, and yes, that needs to be well regulated. Now, the question I guess that we're trying to ask ourselves right now is, should addiction be controlled via the gaming community itself, so people have to kind of go to doctors, go to those sessions so that they can get off their addiction, or should the government regulate it, or should publishers regulate it? Is that the current question we're kind of going for at this moment?
I would say government regulated.
You prefer government regulated.
So in that case, let's focus on this question right now. So that way we can kind of move on and not have scrambled thoughts. So all right. So Brian right now has basically said, I believe that while this may prove to be addicting, it's currently on the gamers to decide how far they kind of want to go with loot boxes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you have an addiction, it's also on you to kind of try to quit.
Mm-hmm. That's my stance. Yeah, that's my stance on it. Yeah,
that's Brian's stance. Now, I believe
the rest of you guys.
Okay. So
my stance is basically like we're at a point where it's becoming a problem, and these companies are doing whatever the fuck they want, and no one's touching them. To the point where you're like, the whole meme, do you want ants? We got you, because you're gonna get ants. The same thing is that like they're getting government regulation, and they're probably gonna get it. And the thing is, like, the ESA, who runs E3, has a giant lobbyist group who created the ratings things.
They are a lobby group, actually.
Yeah, who have been working with EA and Activision, because they get a chunk of that change. Actually, why would anyone not lose a source of revenue or be regulated on a source of revenue? It's like malicious. It's malicious, and it's targeted. It's not okay. It'd be fine if it was an option, but it shouldn't be for something that is a $60 game I already paid for, and then you're forcing me to pay more money to basically actually continue the game. But that's not okay. That's not okay. Single player games are single player games. There's no advantage of getting any form of microtransaction or loot box by random chance to increase my experience for said game. It's not. That's not.
Sorry,
okay.
are we still talking about addiction, or are we talking about fairness at this point?
We're talking about just like games.
We're talking about games in general. I'm saying my point on that, at least. I'm for government regulation because we're at a point where it's getting ridiculous.
Kristen,
there was a time they could have self-regulated, but at this point, because it seems like the ESA is in cahoots with big publisher, it's not like the only real way to really fix it is through government regulation, and it has given them pressure. Was it Belgium already said no? No loot boxes. No loot boxes. So I think it was Blizzard that changed their version of Overwatch, and now it doesn't function the same way as like everywhere else. Where they're, I'm not sure exactly the main changes, but I think they display the chances of their loot boxes, or they go ahead and basically make it less predatory.
And with that note, I would also agree that we do need some sort of regulation for it. But this regulation should mostly focus in the same way that we're currently dealing with tobacco, where yes, we want people to get off their addiction, and of course we need to get people off their addiction because addiction is never a good thing. But it's also unfair to let people who are not addicted not be restricted from doing the same thing if they have the ability to. But then again, that also brings us on to a new question that I will ask in the next coming thing, unless we're finished with this current question we have right here regarding the idea of addiction.
To your thing of tobacco, you should look at packages that Australia puts out for like cigarettes.
Oh yes, no, they're my favorite. My favorite is actually Singapore's, where they actually show the disease thing. It's actually quite scary. It works as a preventive measure.
So
that kind of idea should be implemented because you should show someone's bank account or you should show someone's amount of charge.
So the thing that I kind of want to bring up in the midst of all this is the other side of this topic, which is the fact that, you know, developers, publishers need the money though, so that they can continue to make their next project, their next video game, or, you know, continue supporting the current servers or services for the current game. You know, they need the money. Like,
all right, so in that case, then we should bring up the next question as: is this type of loot boxing fair?
What do you mean by fair
if
exactly?
Publishers should do it or not do it. Well, let's go back to the original example.
That's why I think like publishers should still maintain rights to, you know, managing their surprise mechanic.
Exactly, which is why the big question we have to answer now is this stuff fair? Should publishers be allowed to do this? Because a lot of the main thing that's kind of nicking on people right now is the fact that a lot of people say that this is not fair, where because people will people who are richer will be able to pay more money, and because they can pay more money, they'll get better resources because they can afford spending more and more until they get what they need.
And
this ties directly to how publishers are allowed to do it, because if it's not fair, then that's the thing. Publishers shouldn't do it if it breaks the game and makes it unfair for people who are not as wealthy as other people. However, if you can construe it as fair, then they have every right to do so.
And from what I see though, in the past it's been shown to be, as you say, Andrew, fair in the evidence of card games. You know, from Pokemon cards, Yu-Gi-Oh cards. People, you know, the big whales, yeah, they spend a lot of money on their decks, they win the tournaments. And you know what? It's because of the way they live their life. It's because, you know, they decided that they're gonna get a good job, get a lot of money, spend money in the right place on the right cards, but the right deck. They decide on their own to use their money in the right way to build the right kind of deck, to build the right kind of game experience for themselves. You know, that's them just being responsible people. Go ahead.
Then you're attaching class to overall enjoyment of said entertainment. People don't need to be reminded that they are poor if they're playing one game and they enjoy said game, and that maybe that's the only game they have.
But why do they not need to be reminded that they're poor? I mean, like, how does that come into any of this?
Okay, wait. Let me pause this.
Escapism.
We don't need to go into class. We don't have to go into class warfare. Let's not go into class warfare, please.
I would love to play the game. I don't know about you.
If we're going to play,
can we have like rich people with like shoot rocket bundles of money?
Already are currently playing the game.
Keep bringing up Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Keep bringing up fucking Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and it's not the same. It's a tangible object versus non-tangible object.
Yu-Gi-Oh, the anime, we're gonna see that's actually an anime about class warfare.
Okay, wait. Okay, so let me moderate here now. Then let's not focus on the class warfare thing solely because it'll open up a new can of worms that will basically keep us online for the next 24 hours. And let's focus on the idea: is this fair to allow people to?
You keep saying it's fair, but like it's totally fine.
It's not.
Okay, so now let's start with one argument. Okay, let me start with setting up the argument for pro and pro and against. So pro loot boxes. Let's go with this. Yes, it can be fair because depending on when you start the game, how much time you have to play the game, and how good you are as a player, these loot boxes can offer some benefits. One example I can give out right now is if you are ever late to playing a game. Let's say a game has been out for several months now and everyone is already like high level, they have all the weapons that are really good, and you're just the new guy. You start off with basically nothing and you kind of have to build yourself up. So it's kind of like what happened in Battlefront 2 if you haven't played, sorry, Battlefront 1, when you haven't played the game for a while. Everyone has everything, you have nothing. So this loot box seems to be a way for people to get back in the game if they want to get on everyone else's level.
Mhm.
So that's one primary argument. The second argument I would put up is this is fair for people who don't have as much time to game.
Exactly, like
Now,
us, like
if
working
we are-
class
yeah,
people
so-
who don't have much time, but you know they have the money.
Yeah.
How are you gonna catch up with other people? Yeah, you got
Okay,
you can
so
put in money
now
to
I'm-
just go
No,
ahead.
no, I'm going to bring my experience into this second point, with in addition to Brian's, because we're kind of in the same bandwagon here. We work a 9 to 5, or even goes later, basically 10-hour job, where we don't really have much time to game, and of course that's just our work. We have to do chores, we have to do have other priorities, have a life, etc. We don't really have that much time to go play video games 24/7 to rank all of our characters up in time. So naturally, this is the loot boxing system was a nice way to catch up in the event that we are missing out and stuff, and it was nice because then you just spend only a few dollars and ta-da, I'm caught up. Now, I personally do not want to spend more money on any game because it's just not the way I like playing the game. So I'm not really I can't really make the full argument that this is beneficial for me per se.
But the
it
option,
does-
the fact
it
that the
does
option is still
present-
there
yeah,
is
it does.
nice, isn't it? The fact that you
Exactly.
can.
The option was there. It's kind of nice because then you can actually catch up. Yes, and then of course that's pretty much. Actually, I'm thinking about my third point. It's kind of tied together with my second point. It's just basically for people who just don't have the time or the current experience. All right, the third one was basically people who are kind of disadvantaged of playing video games because they're not good at said video games. So it's kind of nice for them to be able to have fun and play with their friends if they're able to, again, be on the same level. So all of this, in turn, goes to the point that, yes, it is good for us because we, as people who are either A, late to the party, B, need more time to play, or C, we need to catch up because we're just not as good. It's very helpful.
And you know, it's also on us as players, as the individual, that you know we're late to the party. Just that's on us. We could have been early, but
That's on us.
we're just late. It's just on us. And whether we're gonna
Yes,
spend more
and
money
I
or not, that's on us. It's up to the individual.
Again, I won't deny that. Yes, it's completely on us. Now, moving
Libertarian
to the...
Brian sucks.
sorry?
Yeah, and I think we're leaking
we get
into
jumped.
microtransactions. So loot
We are,
boxes
but-
versus microtransactions. So the idea is loot boxes as random chant, and if you're talking about time savers, those are more microtransactions. You don't randomly get time savers.
True.
Well,
That's
it
a different
depends on the
topic.
game, right? But again, it just depends on the game. We're just focusing more on the stuff that you can
We're-
buy
we're-
that'll basically give us those random chances of... I'm pretty much basing this off of star cards from Battlefront.
Christian, you were saying? we kind of.
I'm not saying anything. I'm lying on the
Alright.
floor in pain. If anything, loot box should stop
What?
this conversation.
Mr. Roboto, please repeat.
Stop. And I can stop.
Mr. Roboto, please repeat. Christian, no.
Arigato, Mr. Roboto, domo. At this point, I'm just gonna say,
Huh?
pay-to-win mechanics should not belong in full $60 games.
Let's you know what?
Okay,
Let's just like go back onto the main topic, and because we're getting short on time now, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Let's just
Alright, so going
let
back
me
to-
just ask this question actually. Based
okay.
on our current predictions for loot boxes in the future, rather than even regulated, do you feel that it is likely to get outlawed, or should it get outlawed?
It should be heavily regulated the same way as any other good should be regulated. It also, on top of that, it's probably going to be reframed in something else because EA is already doing it, and because people just don't give a shit about anything besides whatever playing their games. It'll probably be reframed because the DLC controversy that we had with the horse armor, now we buy DLC. Microtransactions in mobile games, port it over to single player games, it's still in there. I mean, it's still a sticking point because people are saying enough. And I think loot boxes, it's kind of hit the peak where it is. So most likely loot boxes will be less focused on and more microtransaction based loot. But what's going to happen is that people are going to lose their shit for a long time about it. And they're just going to cave off, and then they're going to think of something else. And then they're going to stick with the whole microtransaction and just kind of float, make it look nice, make themselves look good. And then when nobody's looking, they're just going to go, fuck it. and just ramp up the whole bullshit that they're doing now. Because right now, this whole regulation and this whole talking has been happening for years and years and years. And I said this before. They just finally got caught, and they're like, "Oh, we're sorry. It's just a price mechanic." That mentality. The EA does this. EA does this every time. Every single time. Well, it's just we're not blaming you. It's just, we don't know. We're just trying. We're poor people, developer, publisher, trying to make money. Dude, you have a shit ton of money. Bobby Kotick, like, fired 800 people and took a $2 billion bonus. Like, you guys don't need that money.
I'm of the stance that, like, I would actually build off of your point, Alex, that they will, like, EA will probably continue to, try to keep rebranding the term loot boxes, I hate to admit it, but try to get away with saying, like, loot boxes are okay. But at the same time, I do feel that, coming from a consumer, at least I'm just a consumer who enjoys seeing, good quality, high quality AAA games. I feel that the more money that EA, that publishers and developers make from loot boxes, from whales, from people who just pour in money even after the game is released, it'll give them the resources they need to make a better next game. Or, keep making more hype, really cool, awesome games. So I'm still of the side that I think loot boxes... I think they should not be as regulated by government so that, companies can still make the money they need for their next big product or, to keep servicing their games. I feel that, loot boxes should be regulated however the company feels it should be so that they can make money.
Redistribution of income, I mean, we just mentioned how much Bobby Kotick makes. It literally just like, if that is the thing they wanted to focus on, they can just really change how much they're being paid, lower it with that. I mean, that's individuals choosing to not make as much money as they possibly can. And we see that real motivation is actually just money. It's not so much funding their next project or
it's just money.
It's very transparent that this is not about the developers or the next project or keeping things going. It's maximize profits. The game.
It's how much I can squeeze out of this $60 product. Because if you imagine this, back in the day, PS2 days, games were I think $50, and that's all everything else. The only thing you could put out was either an expansion or a new product. Now with these extra monetization techniques, they're gonna try to take every consumer's dollar and squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it. And with the loot boxes now, it makes it a lot easier because it's relying on human nature's desire for random chance and for the idea of messing with basically the reward system of someone's brain is by using it and exploiting that. I mean, they've hired psychologists, and they've Activision has made, and I said this again before, Activision has a patent to basically determine random chance and force someone to buy and give them like the idea that they're better than them by matchmaking people with better loot and better equipment. And they had this in Call of Duty, and I believe they had this for Destiny for a tiny bit, and they were like working on this before it got found out, and they lost their shit. Like this is a problem in its own, and it's getting to the point where it's really, really, really like that. Like it was well known. People kept saying things about it, and then people were just like, I don't fucking care.
Andrew, any closing thoughts from your
side? The whole net neutrality kind of thing, where people are like, I don't know what net neutrality is, and they're just like, duh.
Andrew, any closing thoughts from your
I don't care.
Yes. So okay. Wow, you brought them net neutrality, so I kind of want to talk about that in a bit, but that's... Yeah, no, it's going to be another open can of worms.
Just what do you think is going to be the future of loot boxes, then?
Yes, so the future of loot boxes, in my opinion, is I kind of agree with what you guys have been saying. We do need regulation because we can't let addiction run rampant, and video gaming addiction currently is seemingly popping up more and more nowadays, so it has to be something that needs to be addressed, and we can't unleash all this new like gambling-esque addictions onto people because they'll just make the problem worse. So there definitely needs to be some sort of regulation to ensure that people aren't going to be spending all their money on these things. Yet I still believe that it should be available solely because some people will need the extra boost. Now, if I were to make a video game, I would obviously agree that yes, we shouldn't have any loot boxes ever, because I kind of like the old system back in the old days. When Battlefield was out, it was basically all about ranking up. The higher ranks you get, the more you play, the more stuff you unlock, and it has the same border for everyone. So it's a very nice and fair way to play a game. And I hope that they'll be able to, these developers will be able to create games that kind of go back to what the old days were like.
Y'all old people and your fucking back in the old days and shit. Oh crap.
Yeah, because the old days actually games were enjoyable and games were just giant cash grabs. Where I play fucking a single game for almost, what is it now? Destiny 2 is about 2 years old and D1 is about 4 years old. And I don't know how much money I've actually put into that just because Activision piecemealed it, and then they throw the Eververse store in because fucking they want more money, and then they hide exotic ornaments behind a random loot box. Like it's ridiculous. Like it's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Ridiculous.
I agree. It can be ridiculous, especially since I kind of want to use things. But I guess I was just one of the lucky guys who just never really fully cared about that stuff. So all I ended up just paying for was just the base game and all the DLCs.
Yeah. But I've paid for all of those as well, and at the end of the Bungie Activision break-off, where their bullshit was still around, like they've introduced the season pass, and they're still gonna follow the season pass model. But like, I don't know if you guys have recently seen the changes to the Eververse store. No, the Eververse store changes.
I have a lot to say about that. That was bullshit.
I swear, I think you guys are going on to a different topic. Fuck's sake.
No, same.
It's the same topic. Same topic.
Yeah, it's a loot box, but instead of the loot box giving away like the stuff that's being given out this particular season, they made a loot box that gave you all of the old stuff back in year 1, and you have to actually like pay real money to get this season stuff, with only a small portion of it being purchasable without spending money on, which is kind of stupid.
But you're missing the point where they changed how there's a transmog system now, where you don't, because Bungie, for those loot boxes and for those items, all the equipment was intentionally shitty because they didn't want to promote play to win kind of like mechanics, and Activision kept pushing. Now there's a transmog system, so I can actually have my cool Dragonfly Regalia armor from the beginning of Forsaken and actually wear it and not like be concerned about armor loadouts. The fact that
yes, that's the bullshit you were talking about. Okay, so yeah, we used to have these random loot box armor that you can only get from loot boxes, and they're now deciding to switch that from being actual armor to Regalia, which basically just changes the look of another piece of armor.
Transmogging. It's the same thing that how Diablo handles it. And like Bright Dust is now changing. So Bright Dust used to be to buy items by playing it. Now you can only get it by dismantling those Eververse items. So now you can just get Bright Dust by playing the game, and then you can buy the cosmetics through playing the game.
Lots of grinding
stuff. I mean, that's what you're getting yourself into. You know Destiny is a game that's a loot grind heavy game like Diablo with guns, and it's made by Bungie. Like, people already know what they're getting into. So why basically shove a monetization thing that basically can either possibly unbalance the game, or if we're talking single player games, or two, basically pay gate a lot of major things that people like behind a giant random number generator.
Because it's interesting to watch.
It's interesting to watch, but would you like to spend $600 to get one skin that you want?
Yeah, it's kind of it's too much.
It's too much. There's a fine line between good and too much, and we're right now like kind of running towards the too much side, and then we're hitting the brick wall, but we know we can probably go through that brick wall and our heads are all bloody.
God damn.
Yeah, that sums it all right.
Good shit.